In the aftermath of the harrowing ordeal on the Young and the Restless Monday full February 16, 2026, fans can expect that Mariah Copeland will not simply step back into her former life as though nothing happened. Consequences are no longer theoretical, they are immediate, tangible, and unavoidable. Abby Winters and Devin Winters may feel overwhelming relief at being reunited with their son, yet relief does not erase violation. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, will not be swift. And standing at the emotional crossroads of it all is Tessa Porter, torn between loyalty to the woman she loves and the reality of what that woman has done. Let us begin with Mariah herself, because the image is stark, handcuffed, exhausted, emotionally spent, being escorted away not by enemies, but by people who once formed her safety net. Sharon Newman walks beside her not as a mother celebrating redemption, but as a mother confronting the terrifying fragility of her daughter's mind. Detective Burrow represents the other side of that equation, the state, the law, the impersonal machinery that does not bend to sentiment. Between maternal fear and institutional procedure, Mariah sits suspended in a liminal space where she must finally confront the reality that love does not shield one from accountability. She is being transported back to Genoa City, not as a returning daughter, not as a surrogate hero of Dominic's birth story, but as a defendant. Meanwhile, Abby and Devin experience a complicated emotional convergence. Their reunion with Dominic Newman, Abby Winters' chancellor, is overwhelming in its relief. The sound of his voice, the feel of his small arms around their necks, the confirmation that he is physically unharmed, these are mercies that eclipse everything else in the immediate moment. Yet beneath that relief pulses a quieter, darker undercurrent. Their son was taken. Regardless of intent, regardless of mental instability, someone removed him from their protection. That someone was not a stranger, but a woman they trusted intimately. The betrayal is not only legal, it is relational. Dominic himself remains blissfully unaware of the terminology adults would use to describe what happened. He does not conceptualize it as kidnapping. To him, it may have felt like an unusual adventure that grew increasingly confusing. Devin and Abby, instinctively protective, are shielding him from the harsher vocabulary. They answer his questions gently, they redirect when necessary. They refuse to plant fear where innocence still lives. That decision, however compassionate, creates its own tension. At some point, the truth will surface in some form. The careful choreography of how and when that truth is revealed will define whether Dominic's memory becomes trauma or simply an unsettling chapter that fades with time. Abby's forgiveness will not come easily. She has endured enough volatility in her life to recognize when boundaries are shattered. Mariah was not merely an acquaintance, she was a surrogate, a trusted presence in Dominic's earliest days. The intimacy of that bond magnifies the rupture. Abby's anger will likely oscillate between protective rage and reluctant empathy. She understands mental health struggles, she has witnessed them in others. Yet understanding does not neutralize instinct. The primal reaction of a mother whose child was taken does not dissolve simply because the perpetrator was unwell. Devin's response may be quieter, but equally complex. His gratitude toward Mariah for carrying Dominic and helping create their family is deeply rooted. He knows her history. He knows the cult upbringing under Ian Ward, the years of manipulation and psychological conditioning. He understands that trauma can metastasize. Yet he also recognizes that Dominic's safety must be paramount. His internal conflict may center on balancing justice with compassion. He may advocate for treatment rather than imprisonment, but that does not mean he will advocate for immediate reconciliation. Trust, once fractured, demands time and proof. And then there is Tessa. If Abby and Devin embody protective outrage tempered by gratitude, Tessa embodies heartbreak. She has lived through instability before. She has confronted Mariah's vulnerabilities in private spaces where cameras never linger. She knows the difference between mood fluctuation and full psychological collapse. Yet loving someone does not grant immunity from devastation. Tessa stands between the memory of the woman she fell in love with and the reality of the woman in handcuffs. That tension is not melodramatic, it is existential. Does she define Mariah by her illness or by her actions? Does she wait? Does she distance herself for self-preservation? Tessa's struggle is particularly poignant because her love has always been grounded in belief that Mariah could overcome her past, that trauma did not define destiny. Now that belief is being tested in the harshest way. Supporting Mariah through mandated psychiatric treatment and legal proceedings will require resilience that borders on self-sacrifice. Yet abandoning her would contradict everything Tessa once promised. The show positions Tessa not as a passive bystander, but as an emotional barometer. Her decisions will signal to the audience whether redemption feels plausible or naive. Back at the police station in Genoa City, procedural reality sets in. Charges are processed, statements are recorded. The language becomes clinical: unlawful restraint, endangerment, custodial interference. Mariah's mental health evaluation will be requested. Sharon may advocate fiercely for psychiatric assessment, knowing firsthand how untreated instability can spiral. The court may consider diminished capacity, but diminished capacity does not erase accountability, it reframes it. Instead of focusing solely on punitive incarceration, the conversation may pivot toward structured rehabilitation, inpatient treatment, supervised release, restricted visitation, regular psychiatric review. For viewers, the tension lies in whether consequences will feel proportionate, too lenient, and the gravity of Dominic's ordeal risks being minimized. Too harsh, and the narrative abandons its nuanced exploration of trauma's long shadow. The most compelling resolution would likely involve a hybrid approach: legal acknowledgement of wrongdoing, combined with mandatory, intensive treatment. That path honors Dominic's safety while recognizing that Mariah's crime emerged from psychological collapse rather than calculated malice. The difficulty of forgiveness cannot be overstated. Abby and Devin may eventually support reduced sentencing in favor of treatment, but personal reconciliation is another matter entirely. Forgiveness is not a courtroom decision. It is a process measured in months, perhaps years. It requires consistent proof of stability, sustained accountability, and demonstrated change. Even then, forgiveness does not necessarily restore the previous closeness. Some fractures heal visibly. Others remain as faint, but permanent lines across the surface of a relationship. For Mariah, punishment extends beyond legal structures. The knowledge that she nearly mirrored the violation inflicted upon her as an infant will haunt her recovery. To confront the possibility that she became a source of fear to a child she loved is a psychological reckoning more brutal than any jail cell. That realization will likely be the central focus of her therapeutic journey, untangling protection from possession, trauma response from present reality, love from control. As she is led back into Genoa City, the symbolism is unmistakable. She is returning not to reclaim her life, but to dismantle it piece by piece under scrutiny. Friends will watch. Enemies will whisper. Abby and Devin will protect Dominic fiercely. Tessa will wrestle with her heart. Sharon will stand between maternal defense and moral clarity. And the town that once embraced Mariah's resilience will now measure her by her accountability. In the end, this arc is not solely about punishment. It is about the collision between trauma and responsibility. It is about whether a community can hold both truths simultaneously: that Mariah Copeland committed serious crimes, and that she did so while profoundly unwell. The outcome will define not only her future, but the emotional integrity of everyone involved. Because when a child is taken even briefly, nothing returns to normal overnight. Consequences ripple outward, and in Genoa City, those ripples rarely fade quietly. The struggle facing Abby Winters is not rooted in anger alone, but in exhaustion. Relief flooded her when Dominic was placed back into her arms, safe and physically unharmed, yet relief has a short lifespan when layered over repeated instability. This was not the first time she and Devin Winters had felt the unsettling tension of Mariah attempting to hold on to Dominic longer than appropriate, blurring emotional boundaries under the guise of attachment. Even before the abduction, there were moments subtle but unmistakable when Mariah's bond with Dominic felt less like loving involvement and more like possessive fragility. Abby had sensed it. Devin had sensed it. They had chosen compassion then, attributing it to lingering maternal attachment from the surrogacy, to unresolved grief, to emotional complexity that seemed understandable in Mariah's history. But compassion cannot be infinite when a child's safety becomes negotiable. Now, standing in the quiet of their home, with Dominic asleep down the hall, Abby finds herself grappling not only with what happened, but with the awareness that vigilance may become a permanent feature of her life. The idea that she must always remain alert, always scanning for signs that Mariah could spiral again, is suffocating. It is not fair to Dominic. It is not fair to their marriage. Mental illness explains behavior. It does not neutralize the fear it creates. Abby's internal conflict is sharp and relentless. She does not want to be hardened. She does not want to become someone who refuses forgiveness. Yet forgiveness requires safety, and safety requires trust. And trust, once ruptured this profoundly, does not regenerate simply because guilt is expressed or treatment is ordered. Devin's struggle mirrors hers, but unfolds differently. He is analytical by nature, often seeking balance where Abby feels intensity. He acknowledges that Mariah's mental health deteriorated significantly. He understands the weight of trauma her upbringing under Ian Ward, the psychological scars that resurface unpredictably. Yet Devin also recognizes that Dominic's emotional environment must remain stable. He cannot allow history or gratitude to compromise his son's well-being. There is a delicate line between empathy and enabling, and he refuses to cross it again. The memory of searching for Dominic, of imagining worst-case scenarios, lingers in his chest like a bruise that has not yet faded. Abby and Devin will likely present a united front in court, advocating for psychiatric treatment over extended incarceration. They may testify to Mariah's past devotion, to her role in bringing Dominic into their lives. But private forgiveness is another matter entirely. Public mercy does not equate to restored intimacy. The struggle to forgive will be prolonged, uneven, and filled with hesitation. They may agree to supervised visits in the distant future, but not without months, perhaps years of documented stability. Their parental instinct now overrides any prior emotional debt. Meanwhile, the emotional fault line running through Tessa Porter is even more precarious. Tessa had reached a breaking point before Mariah's arrest. The instability, the secrecy, the growing sense that something was deeply wrong, these pressures pushed her toward filing for divorce. In an attempt to reclaim control of her own life, she began envisioning a new chapter with Daniel Romalotti. Jr. Daniel offered calm where Mariah brought volatility. He provided patience without unpredictability. He listened without demanding emotional triage. In many ways, he represented a future unburdened by crisis. Yet life rarely adheres to tidy transitions. Mariah's arrest disrupts that narrative entirely. Watching the woman she once vowed to love in sickness and in health being escorted into custody fractures Tessa's emotional certainty. Divorce paperwork feels procedural in comparison to a criminal charge. The woman she was trying to move on from is now facing court dates, psychiatric evaluations, and public scrutiny. That reality pulls at Tessa's conscience. Loyalty does not vanish overnight. Shared history does not dissolve because a line was crossed. Tessa now stands in an agonizing space between compassion and self-preservation. She needs answers from Mariah, not excuses, not fragmented apologies clouded by instability, but clarity. She needs to understand how the spiral escalated. She needs reassurance that this collapse is treatable, that it is not a recurring inevitability. At the same time, Daniel has shown her unwavering kindness. He did not demand that she erase her past. He did not pressure her into emotional shortcuts. To abandon him now, to return to Mariah in the wake of a criminal charge, would feel like betrayal of a different kind. It would risk repeating the same cycle of chaos that she had just begun to escape. Daniel's presence complicates everything because he is not antagonistic, he is steady. He has been patient, aware that Tessa's heart carries unresolved threads. He does not deserve to be a temporary refuge discarded when crisis reemerges. Yet love is rarely governed by fairness alone. Tessa must confront whether her bond with Mariah is rooted in trauma bonding, in habit, or in something still alive beneath the wreckage. The coming trial will intensify these tensions. As Mariah faces formal charges, the courtroom will become a stage where personal loyalty collides with legal consequence. Abby and Devin will sit together, united but guarded. Sharon will likely advocate fiercely for psychiatric mitigation. Tessa may attend, torn between wanting to support Mariah and fearing that her presence signals reconciliation. Daniel may remain quietly supportive, giving Tessa space rather than ultimatums. Each decision, where she sits, who she speaks to, whether she testifies, will carry emotional weight. Mariah herself will have to confront not only the legal ramifications, but the emotional reality that her actions have destabilized every relationship she holds dear. Her mental health deterioration explains the hallucinations, the paranoia, the irrational need to isolate Dominic. But explanation does not shield her from the ripple effects. Abby's guarded distance, Devon's measured skepticism, Tessa's conflicted gaze, these are consequences as tangible as any sentence handed down by a judge. For Abby, forgiveness will require evidence of sustained treatment and accountability. For Devon, it will require proof that Dominic will never again be placed at risk. For Tessa, it will require a reckoning with her own boundaries, deciding whether love includes enduring another chapter of recovery or whether love sometimes means stepping away. And for Daniel, it will require patience that may test even his generous nature. This storyline refuses to offer easy absolution. Instead, it forces every character to examine their thresholds. How much instability is forgivable? How much risk is acceptable in the name of empathy? When does compassion become self-sacrifice? The answers will not arrive simultaneously. Abby and Devon may lean toward cautious mercy without emotional reconciliation. Tessa may oscillate between support and distance. Daniel may wait quietly, hoping she chooses stability over nostalgia. In the end, the struggle is not about choosing sides. It is about determining whether healing can coexist with accountability, whether love can survive public failure, and whether trust once shattered by fear can ever be rebuilt. Abby and Devon's gratitude for Dominic's safe return anchors them, but gratitude does not erase vigilance. Tessa's heart remains divided, but division does not guarantee indecision forever. Mariah's punishment will unfold not only in court, but in the fragile, uncertain space between those she loves and those she nearly lost.